Here in Washington, we have our own volcano threat in the Cascade Mountains, which on average erupts once or twice every century.
In Washington state, we've got our own ticking time bomb, Mount Rainier. This mighty peak, nestled in the Cascade Mountains, usually erupts once or twice every 100 years. And now, signs are pointing to the possibility that its time may be coming again. Just recently, 24 park rangers were called in for an urgent operation along the Liberty Ridge route. Why? Because the iconic Mount Rainier, standing over 14,400 feet tall, is beginning to stir. For decades, it's been a symbol of raw beauty and natural power, its snowy slopes inspiring awe in millions. But now, that peaceful image is giving way to rising concern. Geologists have just issued a red alert, the highest level of volcanic warning, indicating that Rainier may be on the verge of a major eruption. This isn't just theory. This is the real deal. A seismic event of this scale could send shockwaves through communities, damage infrastructure, and disrupt ecosystems far beyond the mountain's base. Before we dive deeper, hit that like button and subscribe for more updates on this developing story. This didn't happen overnight. For weeks now, Rainier has been rumbling with swarms of small, shallow earthquakes, classic signs of magma on the move. Scientists have also recorded elevated gas emissions and abnormal geothermal activity. Crater temperatures are hotter than usual for this time of year, and new steam vents or fumaroles have opened up near the summit. Satellite images even show surface deformation, proof that pressure is building underground. A red alert is no small thing. It means an eruption is either imminent or already happening. Mount Rainier hasn't had a major blow-up in about 1,000 years, but its potential for devastation has never been in doubt. It's considered one of the most dangerous volcanoes in North America, mainly because of how close it is to heavily populated areas like Seattle and Tacoma. But it's not just the ash and lava that worry scientists. The real nightmare is lahars, massive, fast-moving mud flows created when volcanic heat melts Rainier's thick glaciers. These mud rivers can barrel down valleys at highway speeds, swallowing anything in their path. Homes, roads, bridges, entire neighborhoods. And areas like the Puyallup and Nisqually river valleys. They're sitting directly in the danger zone. Emergency planners have mapped out evacuation routes and warning systems for years, but drills on paper can't replace the urgency of a real threat. With the red alert active, those what-ifs are now what next. Right now, geologists are monitoring the mountain around the clock. They've picked up harmonic tremors, a telltale sign of magma pushing through underground channels. Gas sensors are detecting increased levels of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, which often signal that magma is nearing the surface. Add in data from satellite flyovers and drone footage, and the message is clear: Rainier is waking up. If it erupts, the fallout could be massive. Ash clouds could spread across Washington and neighboring states, grounding flights, choking the air, and damaging crops. This isn't ordinary dust. Volcanic ash is sharp, corrosive, and capable of ruining engines and electronics. Highways could shut down, power grids could fail, water systems could be contaminated. For hundreds of thousands of people, daily life could be flipped upside down overnight. But it's the lahars that truly send chills down the spine. These aren't just muddy floods, they're fast, destructive avalanches of volcanic debris and melted glacial ice. Historical records show that past eruptions sent walls of mud and rock racing through valleys at speeds topping 60 miles per hour, leveling nearly everything in their path. Concrete buildings, buried, landscapes, rewritten. The town of Orting, which sits directly in a known lahar zone, is now on high alert. Schools there have already begun evacuation drills, and emergency response centers are bracing for a possible large-scale exodus. The threat doesn't stop at human impact. An eruption could devastate the environment. Mount Rainier is part of the biodiverse Cascade Range, home to rich forests, rivers, and countless species. A significant eruption could destroy habitats, pollute waterways, and reshape entire ecosystems. Salmon-bearing rivers, already struggling due to climate change and development, could be overwhelmed by volcanic debris. Wildlife migration paths might be blocked, and the air itself could become unbreathable for weeks. What took nature thousands of years to build could unravel in just hours. With the red alert now active, coordination has surged between local, state, and federal agencies. The USGS and Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, PNSN, have ramped up their presence, sending out more field teams and installing new monitoring gear across the mountain. FEMA is pre-positioning resources for potential disaster response, and emergency shelters have been opened across the region. Public alert systems have been activated to keep communities informed and prepared. Despite modern advances in monitoring and prediction, no technology can pinpoint the exact moment Rainier will erupt. Scientists must read the signs, earthquakes, gas emissions, ground deformation, and make real-time decisions. It's a delicate balance. Wait too long and lives are at risk. Act too early and people may become desensitized to future warnings. But with a red alert in place, the time for waiting is over. The message is clear. This is a serious situation, and the window to act is closing. Mount Rainier's awakening also reminds us of the volatile nature of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the earthquake and volcano-prone belt that circles the Pacific Ocean. Rainier shares this explosive neighborhood with giants like Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood, and Mount Baker, all of which have erupted in the last 100 years. But Rainier's towering height, icy slopes, and proximity to major cities make it one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the country. The psychological toll is already setting in. Families are prepping go-bags, schools are running drills, small businesses are weighing whether to stay open or shutter. The mood across affected areas is heavy with uncertainty. Volcanic eruptions, unlike storms or wildfires, offer few visible clues until it's too late, and that invisibility feeds fear. What was once a postcard-perfect view has become a looming threat. Media outlets have gone into overdrive with live reports, expert interviews, and footage from monitoring stations. But officials warn the public to be cautious. Stick to reliable sources. Social media may be fast, but it's also fertile ground for panic and misinformation. In times like these, staying grounded in facts is key. Scientists continue to remind everyone, while we can't stop a volcano, we can prepare for it. That's why town halls, both virtual and in person, are being held to educate residents on LAHA sirens, safe zones, and what to pack in an emergency kit. Public transit is on standby for potential evacuations, hospitals are finalizing contingency plans, and supply chains are being checked and reinforced. For many indigenous communities, Mount Rainier, also called Tacoma, is more than just a mountain. It's a sacred being woven into stories, rituals, and ancestral memory. While scientists focus on seismic readings and gas emissions, native voices remind us of the mountain's spiritual heartbeat. For them, the current red alert signals not only physical danger, but a deep spiritual disturbance. It's a call to approach the crisis with respect for both the earth and the cultural traditions tied to it. Beyond cultural significance, the economic stakes are growing. The Pacific Northwest is a vital engine of commerce, innovation, and agriculture. A major eruption could severely disrupt key routes like Interstate 5 or flight paths over SeaTac International Airport. Delays and closures that would ripple far beyond Washington state. From tech startups in Seattle to family-run farms in Pierce County, businesses are preparing for potential impact. Insurance companies are already crunching numbers, while economists model recovery strategies in case the worst happens. In the scientific community, attention is turning to the chemistry of Rainier's magma. Unlike Hawaii's smooth-flowing lava, Rainier's magma is thick, sticky, and gas-rich, conditions that make explosive eruptions far more likely. If that pressure is released suddenly, ash clouds and pyroclastic flows could erupt with violent force, reaching the upper atmosphere and possibly affecting regional weather patterns. If sustained, it could shift climate conditions across a broader area. Global interest in Mount Rainier is also growing. Volcanologists from around the world are tracking its signals and sharing data, knowing that one eruption can teach valuable lessons about others. What happens here could refine how we predict volcanic behavior, guide emergency planning, and strengthen global preparedness for natural disasters. In a world increasingly shaped by climate extremes and geological instability, even one eruption becomes a vital learning experience. Across Washington, there's now a collective pause, a quiet tension. Rainier has always stood tall on the horizon, awe-inspiring and majestic. But now, its silence feels different. The red alert has cast a spotlight on its dormant strength, and every tremor, every gas emission feels like a message. Emergency teams remain on high alert. Residents watch the skyline with a mix of reverence and dread, waiting for what might come next. Though the eruption hasn't begun, the signs are building. Something is shifting beneath the surface. The question is no longer if, but when and how bad. What's certain is this: the giant has stirred. And when such a force begins to awaken, the world must take notice. Should Rainier erupt, the effects won't stay local. The impact would spread quickly, stressing the intricate web of systems that keep the region running. Roads, bridges, rail lines, airports, all of them could be affected. If even a few of these are damaged or blocked, emergency response efforts could stall. Communities could become isolated. The delivery of food, fuel, and medical supplies could slow or stop entirely. Key transportation routes like state routes 410 and 167 are more than just commuter roads. They're critical evacuation corridors. If lahars or landslides cut them off, rescue operations could become extremely difficult. Likewise, freight and passenger rail lines that pass through valleys at risk from mudflows could be disrupted in an instant. Supply chains would be strained, especially for businesses that depend on just-in-time logistics. Finding alternative delivery routes would be slow, costly, and in some cases, impossible during an emergency, deepening the economic shock. Mount Rainier's reach could extend far above its slopes, right into the skies. Volcanic ash poses a major threat to aviation, capable of stalling jet engines mid-flight and slashing visibility to near zero. Even a relatively small eruption could partially shut down SeaTac International Airport, a critical gateway for travel and commerce. As a major player in global tech trade, the Pacific Northwest depends heavily on air cargo. A disruption here wouldn't just delay flights, it could jam up global supply chains. The potential health impacts are equally serious. Hospitals in Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia already operate near capacity. A volcanic crisis could overwhelm emergency rooms, especially if it combines mass injuries, respiratory cases, and large-scale evacuations. Volcanic ash is especially dangerous for children, the elderly, and those with conditions like asthma or COPD. Fine particles in the air can cause everything from eye irritation to serious lung inflammation. But the strain wouldn't just be physical. Mental health support would become just as essential. Living under red alert, with evacuation orders looming, can trigger fear, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Children and trauma survivors are especially vulnerable. Displacement itself, leaving home, routines, and community, can be destabilizing. Health organizations would need to mobilize rapidly, offering not just medical help, but emotional and psychological care at a scale rarely seen. Clear communication will be key in any crisis response. Accurate, timely information saves lives. Right now, local authorities and scientists are working together to keep the public informed. But a full eruption could disrupt cell towers, internet access, and broadcast signals, especially in remote or mountainous areas already underserved by infrastructure. Without connectivity, it becomes harder to warn people, confirm their safety, or coordinate rescue efforts. Rapid deployment of mobile satellite units and backup communications will be essential to keep teams connected and communities informed. At the same time, social media, though useful for fast updates, could fuel panic if rumors spread unchecked. Emergency managers are already preparing for this by planning shelter locations and supply routes. But even those shelters face risks. Wind could blow ash into evacuation zones, and terrain could block access. Safe shelter means more than just a roof. It means clean water, food, medical support, and reliable sanitation, especially if people are displaced for weeks. There's also the question of animals and agriculture. Farms along Rainier's flanks and in nearby valleys have limited time to act if lahars or ash clouds descend. Evacuating livestock, critical to both livelihoods and food supply, requires planning, coordination and speed. Leaving animals behind creates ethical concerns, but it also raises risks of contamination, disease and environmental damage. Agencies and animal rescue groups are racing to set up temporary shelters and transport solutions before time runs out. Beneath all this is the scientific uncertainty, the mystery still unfolding inside the mountain. Mount Rainier is covered in glaciers, and that frozen mass can turn dangerous fast. If hot magma interacts with water from melting ice, it can trigger sudden, violent steam explosions called phreatomagmatic eruptions. These blasts are unpredictable and forceful, launching ash, rocks, and boiling water into the air. They can come without warning, and they might even act as a trigger for a larger eruption to follow. The long-term environmental impacts of a Mount Rainier eruption could be just as disruptive as the immediate blast. This mountain's glaciers aren't just scenic, they're lifelines. They feed rivers that supply water for farming, power generation, and fragile ecosystems across the Pacific Northwest. An eruption could trigger flooding, change the direction of rivers, and pollute water sources. Lahars, fast-moving floods of ash and debris, can clog reservoirs and riverbeds, increasing the risk of flooding during the rainy season. And as glaciers melt or retreat in the aftermath, microclimates could shift dramatically. Some areas may dry out, while others could see more runoff than usual. This ripple effect could transform alpine meadows, old-growth forests and wetlands that have taken centuries to stabilize. Just a few degrees of temperature or moisture change can alter entire ecosystems. A volcanic eruption might redraw those environmental boundaries in a single day. At the same time, there's real concern about how the energy grid would hold up. Washington relies heavily on hydroelectric power, with dams and transmission lines stretching across the Cascade Range. Volcanic ash could damage key infrastructure, coating insulators, clogging transformers, and causing power outages, especially if rain follows the ash. Wet ash is electrically conductive, and that's a recipe for blackouts. Backup generators may kick in, but they rely on fuel that must be stored, delivered, and rationed carefully in a prolonged crisis. The political picture adds another layer of complexity. Mount Rainier's surroundings are governed by a patchwork of federal, state, tribal, and private jurisdictions. In an emergency, who decides what and where? Coordinating evacuations, accessing restricted land, and managing resources require legal and logistical clarity fast. Any delays could cost lives or stall recovery efforts. Globally, Rainier is more than just a local threat. It's a case study. Volcanologists around the world are watching closely. What happens here could inform how we prepare for eruptions of other glacier-covered volcanoes in regions like Japan, Chile, and Indonesia. International researchers are already sharing data and developing new models to better predict how ice and fire interact beneath the surface. Culturally, the looming eruption is forcing a tough conversation. Over the years, neighborhoods and towns have steadily crept into lahar zones and floodplains, drawn by the region's beauty and economic promise. But now, as risk becomes reality, debates over land use are intensifying. Should we stop building in these danger zones altogether, or invest in making homes and infrastructure more resilient? Communities are weighing safety against heritage, practicality against emotion. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What do you think? Is Mount Rainier gearing up for something big? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.